Hi, Ankush. Thanks for joining. Waiting for this deep dive into our conversation today about the ultimate experience from for your insights, your experience, and your journey through this transformational work that you have been doing. Thanks for joining, Ankush. And you know, I have known you, I've been following your videos and your work for around 2 years, and we have been working together for this experience for a while. But I would want to start with listening from you about your journey of personal transformation, how long it's been, and how did you come to this experience?
Well, firstly, hello, and thank you for having me on this interview. It's a pleasure to be here with you and appreciate the invite. Um, with regards to the question, I've been on a journey of personal development for 21 years, something like that. And it started off really when I was at university, and it was very, common things like building my confidence and connecting with people and really changing how I was showing up in the world. And I say it's been 21 years because that's when I started getting into personal development, but really it was probably a few years before that, before I had any formal education in personal development, let's say, where I really was looking into or realized I didn't need to be how I was, how I was on a default, that there were things I could do to change. And that was a really big insight for me because for most of my young life at that stage, I thought, well, some people are confident and some people are not, and some people are this and some people are that. And so I was just born with however I was born. And when I started to realize that wasn't the case, I was hooked. And for much of my 20s, I was, looking at whatever I could to improve myself, to better myself, to make myself more. And then in my 30s, went into coaching as a profession and got involved with something called the three principles, which is the foundation of a lot of work I do now as a coach, as well as for my own development. Um, and in the last year or so, I mean, before then I was aware of this um idea of who are you being, but really it's been in the last year or so that's had a profound impact on my life in ways that I never had really imagined.
Thank you so much, Ankush. When you say profound impact, people who have known you for a long time and have seen you or followed you, most of them know from three principles and the work that you have been doing. And now we see you with this experience. Can you explain a little more about how different is this experience that you are going through and how impactful is it in your personal and professional lives as well?
Well, the book, The Ultimate Coach, which is known as the Book of Being by Amy Hardison, I was fortunate enough to read the draft, the manuscript, or a version of a manuscript. And I thought it was a great book, and I learned more about Steve Hardison and, one of the top coaches in the world and what he did. So it was really fascinating for me to get to know him better through the book and also what he does. But when the book was released and we were advised to read it in a particular way, and Steve requested that I read the book in a particular way, and he said, read the back cover, read the front two pages, then read the book. And it was all about reading it about myself. I didn't expect it to have much of a difference. I thought, well, I've read the book, but okay, Steve thinks it's important, so I'll read it in that way. And that combined with the work I've done with Steve Hardison has had me really question around what I can create. So the work I was doing with the three principles is really foundational for me in dropping a number of misunderstandings I've had, and gives me a kind of North Star direction. Um, whenever I'm coming up with a challenge or anything else, but the work around being is then, okay, that's the foundation. What can I create on that? And so what I've been finding is I'm now um, tapping into the creative energy that we all have, or the creative energy of the universe, to uh, create in bigger ways, as opposed to living maybe a little bit more on default. And by that I mean I had a nice life. I was doing well, before getting into this work, but it was kind of like, I'm just going to let life show up, and I'm just going to just roll with life, and that was cool. And what I've found in the last year is I can do that, but what I can also do is be a bit more intentional around what I want to create, and pushing the limits of what I think is possible in my business, in my home life, and really seeing the fruits of that in quite a short time span. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Yes, Ankush. Ankush, there's been a lot of conversation going on about, reading the book of being in a certain way. You read the back cover and then you read the first two pages and then you read the book. So there are two questions. The first one I would want you to answer is like, how did you find your experience of reading this book of being the ultimate coach by Amy Hardison in this way? And how would this actually create the desired impact for the reader? What was your experience, and what have you to say about this way, this approach of reading the book?
So I'll give you just one example. When I read the book, or when I read the manuscript the first time, it was interesting. It was interesting reading about Steve and Amy's relationship, and anyone that has met Steve and Amy will tell very quickly they have an incredible relationship and an incredible marriage. And I always assumed, well, that's just the way they are. And in reading the book, I was quite surprised to realize, oh, it wasn't always that way, and they'd had their ups and downs, and some of the downs were pretty significant. So that was on the level of, oh, that's interesting, that's surprising. But when I read the book about me, and I'm reading the same chapters, the same words, it started to have me inquire for myself, well, what can I do, and who can I be in my marriage? So as opposed, like, oh, this is cool that these two people have created something for themselves, wonderful. It was more of a case of, well, can I be inspired by this to create my version of this in my life? And it started to open up questions for me. It started to open up lines of inquiry for me of what I could create in my life. Because, to be frank, what Steve's created is phenomenal in his life, and a number of his clients, they've just got phenomenal lives. And I hadn't even realized this, but I had my first session in Steve's office in December 2021, and I approached that session as a kind of little old me. I'm not the same as a lot of people who've been in this office. I'm not as wealthy. I'm not as this. I'm not as that. And I hadn't even realized I had that going on until I was getting ready to go. And so, again, reading the book can be an inspiration for me of like, well, I can do that, or I can be different. I don't have to show up in that way. I could show up in a completely different way. And there's nothing, as Steve says, as so many coaches, teachers, gurus, mentors will say, there's nothing that I do that you can't do. And we've all heard that. But really reading the book and going, well, if that's really true, well, what can I take, and what can I create, and who can I be through these inspirational stories? And like I said, that had a much greater impact than I thought it would have.
Great. Ankush, you know, we have all been working with this name, Steve Hardison. You have worked with some of the biggest names in the transformational work, and now you're working with Steve Hardison. There's no comparison, but I would still want you to help us understand Steve Hardison from your perspective. How would you define, or how would you understand who he is? And if I do not know who Steve Hardison is, how would you describe Steve Hardison for us?
What a difficult question. Thanks, Ranjan, putting me on the spot with that. Um, well, Steve Hardison is a transformational professional. If you know nothing about Steve, you can say he's a transformational professional. Um, he helps people change their lives. Now, some people will call him a coach. He has a nickname, the ultimate coach. But from what little I've experienced of him, and at the point of this recording, I've had 4 2-hour sessions with him. What he does isn't coaching. Um, I wouldn't really know how to describe it. Steve calls himself a soul orthodontist, but it's coaching is just a word that people use, but it's so far beyond anything else I have experienced. Very intense, very focused, and just world class. I mean, beyond world class. So I was intrigued by Steve because my coach of 8 years is a gentleman called Steve Chandler, and anyone who's read Steve Chandler's books knows that Steve Hardison was Steve Chandler's coach. So because Steve Chandler had such a profound impact on my life, and I really mean that, I am so grateful to Steve Chandler for everything he's done for me. He's been an angel, and I owe so much of my success, especially my professional success, to Steve Chandler. So I kind of had elements of Steve Hardison flow through Steve Chandler, but I was intrigued. But I don't know what I was expecting, but it was very different in a good way, working with Steve. So um, I'm encouraging people, if they get an opportunity to attend the event you're organizing in India, to experience Steve, to do so, because it's a unique experience. And if you're especially interested in growing yourself, developing yourself, being the best version of yourself, it's worthwhile, even for curiosity's sake. It's worthwhile, which is what I did, going, okay, well, this gentleman has clients fly around from around the world to see him, spend time with him, pay him an awful lot of money, and they're happy to do so. What's going on here? And rather than take my word for it, I would encourage people to experience it for themselves. Show up empty, show up with an open mind, and then you'll have your own answer to that question.
A great lead, Ankush. Steve Hardison is known as, Steve Chandler is known as the godfather of coaching, and Steve Hardison is known as, you know, he is one of the highest paid coaches, or the highest paid coach in the world, and people would pay in that highest amount and travel to his place to get coached by him. And he has coached some of the biggest names in the coaching world. He has coached Steve Chandler. He has coached Rich Litwin. He has coached Michael Neal. He has coached Ianla Vanzin. And yet, probably, why would somebody pay this big amount? What is that unique experience? How would you put it in a nutshell? How would you want us to know, like, Why would people would want to pay? Let's say people have read 100 books, people have read 100, gone through 100 different programs and workshops and trainings and talks. What makes the presence of Steve Hardison so different that people would want to experience that? Because we have examples, people who have attended the London experience and the Arizona experience. People have come there, people have participated, people have created. You were one of the most important creator. What's so special and unique about it, Ankush?
Well, again, I can only really speak from my experience, Ranjan. And like you say, my coach, Steve Chandler, is known as the godfather of coaching. He's within coaching circles, very well known, very respected, very good at what he does. And I've got some incredible value from our coaching. Um, so no one needs to go and hire Steve Hardison, as far as I'm aware. Maybe some people do. I didn't need to do that. But I had met Steve a few times in London, once in Arizona, and every time I met him, I was more and more impacted by just who he was, and less so what he said, but where he was saying it from. There was
Mm,
something about that, and so I was intrigued. I was intrigued, and I scheduled and paid for a session with him. And for me, it was just an phenomenal session, which led to a huge breakthrough for me in an area that I had been trying to make a breakthrough for a long time, and had incremental shifts, which was around professional self-esteem. Um, and this one session with Steve made a huge jump. So I can just talk about that for me. So that was valuable for me. Um, so much so that I decided to have more sessions with him and pay his fee. And I'll say this, that Steve isn't the highest paid coach in the world. I don't know what Tony Robbins charges now, but I remember 10 years ago, Tony Robbins, or it was said that he would charge $1 million a year to his clients. So there are coaches who are charging uh, uh, what might seem like a lot of money, but as Steve says himself, that often his clients tell him that he's undercharging, and I really feel that Steve undercharges, which is partly why he's so successful, because you actually get more than what you pay for, and I've certainly found that I'm getting so much more than I thought I would, or I'm paying for. So, but that's different for different people. For one person, it might not be worth it, or they might not want to, or there might be a million reasons. That's not important. And there's only one of Steve Hardison. He can't coach everyone, just like there's only one me and one you and anyone else who's in this industry. Um, but he's very, very good at what he does. He's the best that I know of at what he does. What we might call coaching or transformation. And so for a lot of people, that's worth a lot more than what he charges. But again, these are just my opinions and thoughts and ideas. I would encourage people to check this out for themselves, because that's what's really important. It is, what do you think? And also, for me, one of the things that I really like with Steve is it's not about Steve. A lot of people make it about Steve, but Steve has told me over and over and over again, anything I can do, you can do. Anything I can do, you can do. It's not about placing him on a pedestal and doing anything. In fact, it's been the opposite. He's been lifting me up, and he has a desire to lift people up and help them see the magnificence in themselves, and certainly in bigger ways than they ever thought possible. And that's certainly been true for me. Um, And he even said, he goes, my aim is for any one of my clients to see me in their rear view mirror, i.e., he wants people to overtake him, whatever that means for them. So, yes, he charges comparatively to other coaches a lot of money, but then what he does is not comparative to what other coaches do. So it's all relative. And again, I would encourage people to check it out for themselves and see if it resonates.
Thank you, Ankush. Ankush, the book of being the ultimate coach. The moment you read the title, the ultimate coach, it sounds as if it's only for coaches. And yeah, instead of I asking you, I would want you to share about what how the title of the book relates, how it relates to the book, and what the book actually is about.
I mean, again, I can give my opinion. I didn't write the book. Might be a great question to ask Amy Hardison and Alan Thompson, who did the research for the book, or even Steve. For me, Steve is known as the ultimate coach. People call him that. So it's called the ultimate coach because it's an inspiration drawn from much of his life and those of his clients. So why they chose that title, I couldn't tell you. I didn't choose the title. I haven't asked them the question. But it's certainly not a book just for coaches. And there are plenty of stories of people who've read the book who aren't coaches, who've had real powerful insights and shifts and ideas. And there's a Facebook group called The Ultimate Coach, which has got thousands of members. And there's plenty of people in that group who are not coaches. I believe Steve said to me the vast majority, most of his clients are not coaches. He works with a few coaches, but he works with people. He works with individuals, and the work that he's presenting, which is all about state of being and being having such a profound impact, that applies to absolutely anyone. It's not just for coaches. It's any human being can alter their state of being and have a vastly different life to the one they're living now, should they choose to.
Ankush, you've been a coach for a very long time. How long, Ankush? Roughly?
Just over 10 years.
Just over 10 years. Ankush, you have learned a lot from many different masters. And as we just discussed, that the book is not just for coaches, it's for any human being, because most of Steve's clients aren't also coaches. But I would want to ask you on the other side, in addition to all the work that you have done as a coach to learn the skill and the art of coaching and connecting with people, how has this work and this book of being and your work with Steve Hardison impacted your work as a coach with your clients?
It's made a huge difference. And especially the conversations I've had with Steve alongside reading the book have just awakened a lot in me. And what I found is that the more possibility that I see for myself and then I step into it, the more I see for other people. So when I think about the conversations I'm having with my clients this year, they tend to be bigger conversations. We're tending to talk about things and possibilities that I might not necessarily have talked with them about or created with them. I'm being more direct often, not always, but I'm often being more direct, not because I'm trying to be like Steve Hardison, that would be a fool's errand, but it seems to have just come through me that I'm really finding myself way more committed and taking a stand for my clients. And so I'm willing to call them out. I mean, I would do that before, but even more strongly now in service to them. And what I'm finding is it's been very well received by my clients. and I'm seeing them creating things in a bigger way and doing things quicker than they were doing before, all because of the journey I've been on and what I'm seeing for myself. And I'll really say this, that 2023, I've seen way more growth and change in 2023 than I thought possible in every area of my life, as a parent, as a husband, as a son, as a coach, as a business owner, as a neighbor. I mean, really across the board. And at the time of this recording, just 2 days ago, I had an opportunity to face one of my biggest fears, and I held a tarantula, this massive spider. And those people who know me have known historically I've been petrified of spiders, absolutely petrified. And I will admit that I'll often get my wife to take the spiders out of the house when we've got a spider at home. And I have on occasion taken out some of the smaller ones. That's what I've built up to. But to go from that to hold, a thing that was nearly as big as my hand, um, and enjoy holding it, was really something that I would not have thought possible. I really would not have thought that would be possible, um, at all. And so, and similarly with my marriage, touch wood, my wife and I we've never been more in love with each other, and we've had a good relationship, and it's nice, and we married for a while now, um, but yeah, for it to go from what it was to what it is now is just unbelievable. So, um, you can't, as a coach, in my opinion, have those kinds of shifts and it not affect the work that you do with people. You just can't. In fact, forget coaching. You can't be a human being and have these kind of shifts and it not affect people in your life. You can't help it. It's not something that you do, right? When you're being a different person, that affects people. It has to, right? If I'm being angry and grumpy and miserable, it's gonna affect people around me. But if I'm being generous and happy and loving and kind, that's also going to affect people around me. Again, it can't not. Right. So, um, and I'm seeing that in so many small ways and big ways, things that no one will ever know, but I know, like, that's a big thing for me. That's a big thing for me. And I'll never even talk about it potentially. But as I'm shifting, it's showing up all over the place. And then I'm seeing repercussions of that. And I'm like, well, either I'm having thousands of coincidences, which I don't think so, or as I'm shifting who I'm being in the world consciously, um, deliberately, that is creating a very different life for me.
Ankush, when we speak about a being-centered life, a being-centered approach to life, on the other side, we have this, uh, you know, a strategic approach to life. And the moment people, we have lots of literature around that, lots of trainings and talks about planning, preparing, talking, strategizing your life and everything. The moment most of the people, when they hear about being centered approach, it sounds like a passive, sounds like a spiritual understanding of what life is. And somewhere at the back of your mind, people have a tendency to think that, well, of course, we might understand what a being-centered life is, but how come a being-centered approach to life how will it help us create what we actually want to experience in our physical, material reality? How would you help them understand this?
I don't think it's a passive thing at all. It's the most active thing I can think of. And I'll give you an example. I had heard stories of people going to Steve Hardison and saying, I want to create, a 10 million pound business, or I want to double my revenue in my business. I want to do this, I want to do that in my business. Very financial goals. And Steve, allegedly, this is what I've heard, would say, well, I don't coach your business. Right? I'm not a business coach. Um, I help you be the person who's going to double their business. I'm going to help you
Mm,
be the person that's going to create a 10 million or $100 million business. And so I'd kind of heard things like that and I didn't really get it, but it's landing more and more that whatever I want to create in the world, well, who would I need to be to create that? So if I want to create an incredible marriage, for example, who would I need to be to have that marriage be incredible? And then all of a sudden I get insights of like, well, I could do this different. I could do that different. I did an exercise at my most recent men's immersion. I do these retreats. And I said, right, just for fun, everyone that, and most people were in a relationship. And I said, write down all the complaints that your partner has about you, right? Just non-judgmentally, just write them all down. Okay. Now, if you want to be a better partner, there might be some clues in that, right? It doesn't mean you have to do everything, doesn't mean you have to change yourself for other people, but people are often telling us, they're giving us clues in relationships,
mm,
right? So I'll give an example of mine. My wife was always asking me to do some more of the cooking, you know, and I was like, oh, I'm no good at cooking, you know, and I would always just put it off. I'll do anything. I'll do the washing up. I'll do put the kid to sleep, take him to the nursery. I'll do anything apart from cooking. Well, if I wanted to be an exceptional husband, right, there, there's a clue there. There's a clue there. If I start cooking more in my wife's eyes, is that going to make me an exceptional husband? Is she going to go around and say my husband is exceptional? More likely, if I do that, it's not rocket science, right? If I want to be an amazing neighbor, right? Anyone can sit down and think of 10 ways. If you really sat down with a piece of paper, 10 ways you could be a better neighbor to, your neighbors. If you live in an apartment building, if you live in an estate, if you just live in a house, wherever, those people around you, how can you add value to their lives? How can you be of service to them? You can come up with a bunch of ways. It's very active. Similarly, in your business, people tend to know if you sat down and go, right, if I had to double the revenue in my business in the next 3 years, whatever business you're in, who would I need to be? You ask yourself that question and you're going to get answers, right? Um, I, I got answers. I can ask myself that question today and I'll have answers.
Can you share an
So,
example? Like, when you say, who would I need to be? And you get the answers of doing. I need to do that. I need to do this. But how is an answer, which is a being answer, is different from a doing answer?
well, it comes from being,
Mm,
right? So that I see them as very interconnected. So, um, for example, I work with business owners, entrepreneurs, and one of the things that they might say is, "Oh, I'm procrastinating. I'm not getting the things done that I need to get done."
mm,
So I'm not talking about, okay, well, let's give you some strategies to be more effective and productive. There's loads of those out there. But a being centered approach is, well, who would you need to be to get this handled? And therefore, it's not about the specific thing they do, but it's about having the commitment to create a system that works for them. And I had this very conversation recently with a client of mine. It was like, I can give you 100 systems. It'll just be information. But it was more about, are you committed to finding a system that will work for you? Are you committed to doing the things and being the person that's going to do the things that create the outcome you want? That's the most important thing. Because if a client's not willing to do that, if I'm not willing to do that, if you're not willing to do that, if we're not willing to be committed to be different, then the doing, won't happen. And I remember one of my first mentors in coaching, he said, if coaching was as simple as telling people what to do, if it was just about doing, then we wouldn't need any fitness coaches, or
Yes.
very few. You'd just be like, eat healthier, exercise more, right? That encapsulates a lot, right? We're
Yes.
just like, oh, people know that. It's not people don't know what to do. But again, it's like, well, are you being the person that's gonna indulge and not eat healthily and eat your feelings? Or are you going to be the person that's going to make a stand for your own health and your fitness, right? Are you going to be the person that works out, exercises, or are you going to be the person that stays in bed? You've got a choice. And then how you do that is up to you. Some people might go, well, I want to do yoga. Some people might say, I want to go to the gym. Some people might say, I don't like working out with anyone, so I want to work in a group. The doing comes afterwards, but the being is first. And I had a conversation with Steve Hardison last week. He invited me into a conversation with a client of his. It was an incredible conversation. And one of the key things I got from that conversation is commitment is the foundation for miracles. And that really spoke to me because if you don't have the commitment to be different, then really the transformation can't come after that.
Hmm.
And we all have commitments. Anyone who thinks they're not committed to anything, people go, oh, I don't have any commitment. I'm not committed to anything. I never do anything. I can find 5 ways that they're committed, right? They're often committed to having a shower or getting ready or brushing their teeth. Well, that's just brushing my teeth. Well, yeah, but you don't have to, right? People are committed to certain
Yes.
things,
Yes.
even things that may not be serving them. They might be committed to not looking bad in front of other people. So it's not that people don't have the power in them, they do, but it's about being conscious and making that commitment to be different. And you don't have to. But for me, it was so powerful knowing there was really a choice. I mean, that takes me back right to the start of my personal development journey. It was like, well, you can have this or you can have that. And there's like a million options, but do I want to live my life on default and this is the way I'm going? Or do I want to take that? And it might be a more difficult path or look like a difficult path, but um, there's rewards on that path. I want to do that, and you don't have to. And we get to decide that all the time. Who do we want to be? Do we want to be mean, angry, upset, petty, jealous, whatever? It's a choice. It's a choice. Do you want to be different? And it doesn't necessarily mean that it's easy. It's a continual decision. I mean, I recite a bunch of statements, declarations, as Steve has helped me craft these every day because I'm making a commitment to be those declarations. And that is like I said, I think I said earlier that um, I held this spider and I also held a snake. Even the day before, I was thinking I don't even want to enter the house. It's not like my fear disappeared, but I had a choice. I mean, like, am I going to be a scaredy cat, or I'm going to be courageous, right? Am I going to be brave, and also, am I going to be a role model for my son? Because I don't want him to pick that up. So no, I want to be a role model to my son. I want to be brave, so I'm going to be that. I'm going to go there and I'm going to see how it unfolds. In the end, I held all these animals, right? Which was a really big deal for me. For some people, it's not a big deal. It was a really big deal for me. But I have a choice. I don't have to live on default. Like, well, no, I'm afraid of tarantulas, so I'm not going to touch it. Right? It's stepping into that, and just knowing I have the choice just opens up so much more because once I know I have the choice, I can't live on default mode. I have to create.
Yes, Ankush. That That's so valuable. And Ankush, I would want you to share about, for everybody who's going to listen to this and watch this interview, what's behind this event, Ultimate Experience? I know we are creating that in India, but can you share what you understand and you know about the birth and then you creating the Ultimate Experience in London? I would want you to share about your experience with the Ultimate Experience.
Well, so Judy Thurston created this event in Phoenix, Arizona. It's very well known Steve doesn't do stuff like that, and she managed to convince him, and he said, "I'll come if there were a certain number of people," which she got in the room, and it was, I don't know, it started off as a book launch. Steve's not really interested in selling books; he's interested in talking about being and helping people be different and enroll them into their state of creating a state of being that is truly magnificent. And so he did that. And then there was a chap in London called Matt Smith, and he got inspired to create something. And he said, I'm going to create it. And again, Steve said, well, I'm not going to speak. And he managed to enroll Steve in doing that. And then I got involved a little bit later as one of the leaders of that event to create something really remarkable. Um, and there were a lot of people involved in making that happen. But it was really, really remarkable what was created, and it was a great team effort. And now I know that you are creating something in Mumbai in February next year, February the 25th, and I'm very honored to be asked to be a speaker at that event. And for me, again, it's another iteration of the two events that have come before. But ultimately, what it's really about is awakening in people. This is certainly for me the understanding of what state of being is, why it's so transformative, and how you can harness it. To me, these are not seminars, these are not places to go to get information, but really anything that I do in my business or anything I'm involved in, the only thing I'm interested in is transformation. What I care about, if I'm going to put my time and energy and resource into doing something, and it doesn't matter whether I'm getting paid for it or not, and I'm not getting paid for this, um, but is to create a change in people's lives. That's why I do what I do. And
Yes.
so I'm speaking here because I really believe that there are huge possibilities for change through people waking up to seeing something. And I will say this for me, it has taken a lot of repetition, and I still feel like I'm scratching the surface around what state of being is. I haven't created my talk yet in India. Um, I know the topic of it, and it's going to be about being, but I haven't created the full talk yet because I know I'm going to be different by the time the 25th of February comes along, and I'm
Yes.
going to have seen things differently. So this is just a fantastic opportunity for people to see that for themselves or get a glimpse of it for themselves. And that has paid massive dividends for me. I mean, I was one of the leaders in London, but when I sat in the room and I was just watching the speakers and listening to the talks, I mean, there was so much value. I mean, so much value. I still am getting value from some of the things that were said in that room, right? And for me, you know, there are so many coaches you can hire. There's so many talks you can attend. There's so many webinars you can be enroll onto. And for me, I look at, you know, ROI. What's my return on investment? Investment of money and time. And so for me, I'm involved in this because I think this is going to be one of the highest ROI things that you can ever attend if you show up open, if you're willing to listen, if you're willing to show up not with, oh, I know this already, but really listen with fresh ears. There's something truly remarkable on offer. And I already know I've got clients of mine who are saying they want to travel from the US, from Europe, to be. Some of them have already bought tickets to be in Mumbai because they see this for themselves, right? So this is not just something for the Indian population, and we found this in London too. We had so many more people come from overseas than well, certainly than I expected. And I see the same thing in India, that there are people going to be traveling into India for this, which is what a remarkable experience. And I'm looking forward to coming back to Bombay. I haven't been for quite a number of years. But ultimately, it's about your life never being the same again. If that's what you're willing to have happen, it won't be. It can't be.
Yes, Ankush. And thanks for accepting my invitation to be one of the speakers, because I see that you have been one of the most successful, biggest testimonies of this transformation. You are one of that evidence. You are one of that proof of what's possible when this being centered transformation happens in somebody, and when you actively take charge of coming from your being. And since we're talking about the experience and the event, because 2 days ago, I was in a conversation with Steve, and Steve was curious about, he had some time and I had some time, and he said, Ranjan, I want to learn more about you, and I want to listen what happened behind this experience and everything. So the creation of this. So since we're talking about the experience, I would want to share a small experience of why I decided to go into it and what made me bring this to Mumbai and India. Uh, I've been a single parent. I have two kids for last 6 years, and my mom and my dad were helping me and raise them. And my mom was a patient of arthritis, obesity, and she had her left breast removed with cancer, a breast tumor, and so much so going on. But then I would see every morning, every evening, she would be so powerfully present for everybody in the house, the beautiful things she was creating. But on the other side, Ankush, very honestly, my journey of transformation started in 1997 when I renounced my family to turn a monk in Sri Ramakrishna Mission, Hyderabad. And I stayed there. I got initiated into the spiritual order by Swami Ranganathananda, who was the then world vice president. And but then I had to come back and rejoin my family. I started chasing lots of workshops, lots of books, lots of trainings, lots of seminars, and I was into therapies, alternative therapies, crystal healing, pranic healing, Reiki therapy, so many things. But then it was just about 2 years ago when I got connected with Michael Neal and the understanding of three principles. That's when I started following your videos also, and Michael Neal's videos and all these things. And last year, in the month of April, both my parents, my father and my mom, got affected with COVID, and the hospitals refused to allow them in because they decided that they're not going to survive. And so they weren't allowed. And so in one of my bedrooms, my mom was, almost dying. In the other room, my dad was dying. And I was along with my two kids, and I was taking care of the kids as well as my parents. And I knew for sure that this is a tough phase and I'm going to lose both of them now. But the last 3 days when I was serving my mom, I would go back to her time and again and again. I asked, Mom, do you need anything? Mom, do you need anything? Shall I bring some medicine? Shall I bring some food? But the only thing she would ask for is, she would say is, no, just be here, just be here, and just be here. This is what the message, the essence of what she would speak for the last 3 days. And I didn't, that during those times, it was very tough. I was busy serving her, and then I lost her. And then by God's grace, miraculously, my dad survived it just in 3 days after that, and he got back in 11 days. And as I was going through this emotional depression of having lost my mom because she was so much in my life, I suddenly I suddenly started reflecting on she was such a tough, brave, courageous woman who has been a mom not only to me but also to my kids with so much pain in her body and in her mind. Why wouldn't she ask for anything except saying, just be here, and just be here? And as this was, I was assimilating what was happening and what was the message she left for me. I got connected with this Facebook group, the Ultimate Coach Facebook group, family group. And then I got delivered this draft copy of the Ultimate Coach from Steve Hardison. And when I read that book, that is when the dots of my entire life got connected. And that is when the message my mom left for me got assimilated inside me. And that's when I understood that my being with her was more important than anything that I could have done for her or anything that I could have done to prove that I am a worthy son. And that's when I started understanding, oh my God, there were moments when my mom asked me, like, son, can you sit beside me for a while? I used to do that. I was with her. But then I still remember there were moments when I was in a rush and I want to do something more so that I can do something more for her. But a lady who was going away from this world and saying bye would only ask me, just be here, just be here, just be here, and I don't need anything else. And once I read this book, once I got in touch with the Ultimate Coach family group, once I started understanding the essence of the messages that were shared or as their part of transformation, that's when I realized that this is a message that was waiting for my availability and my presence. And believe you me, I have been a different dad for my kids after that. I have been a different son for my father after that. I have been a different friend. I have been a different employee. I have been it's an ongoing journey. And as it's said in the first two pages, that this is a book about you and it's a never-ending story. And similarly, I experienced this as a never-ending story. And then when in the similar conversation I had with Levan Ditchburn, I was talking, I was interviewing Levan for my show Moments with Masters. And he said, Ranjan, it's all good, but what do you want to create? And who do you want to be? And I said, Levan, my sincere desire, I would want to create the ultimate experience, which happened in London. I would want to do that and create that in India. And he was the guy, we had completed that 1 hour conversation, but he said he stayed back for 90 minutes more. And he said, Ranjan, this is the time, go create it, do it. And he didn't leave me for 90 minutes and he made me call Steve Hardison. It was about 1:30 a.m. in India. And he made me call and he said, this is what Steve would do. If he had your number, he would just take your number, call you immediately and talk to you about this. Why don't you do this? And this could be the experience that thousands of Indians might actually be waiting for, and they might not be aware of it. And this could shift so much in their lives. And your one decision could definitely make a huge difference in people's lives, and especially your life, your family's life, and your kids' life, and your future. And I believed in it. I called Steve, and this magic is happening. And I'm talking to you. I connected with the London team. I connected with Judy Thurston. I connected with Gaby Puma, and hundreds now are getting involved. I got beautiful connections, beautiful team in India now. I got connected with Pooja, Saloni, Venu Bhagwan, and Ajay and Santosh and Yayati and Dipanshu and Farah Ismail. Now we have a powerful team along with the London team, which is fully with us, along with Judy Thurston. And I'm so sure that creation from a being-centered point might take time, like a seed, which is still coming into existence. But once it grows, it definitely has life-shifting impact and life-shifting changes and influence across the world, not just to attend, but through them, everybody and thousands across the world. Thank you so much, Ankush. Thank you so much for who you are being for this movement. Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Thank you so much for creating this powerful creation in London and being that impact for thousands in London and across the world. And we are eagerly waiting for your presence with the newest Ankush who will be created by the event. And I love every bit of this conversation. And definitely, we are going to create more of this together in Mumbai on 25th of Jan, 2023. With this, I would leave this opportunity for your last word.
Just want to say thank you, Ranjan. Thank you for sharing that story with us. It says a lot about who you are and why you managed to convince Steve to come to India, which is really a remarkable feat. And like you, I'm just looking forward to the 25th. Yes, I'm coming as a speaker, but I'm really looking forward to hearing what everyone else has to say too, and meeting incredible people out there. And yeah, if you haven't got your ticket yet, get it. I just booked my flights yesterday, and bring on February.
Thank you so much, Ankush. Love you, and we'll have more such conversations with you, maybe before and after the Ultimate Experience Indian Edition, Mumbai, 25/02/23. Love you. Love you so much, Ankush.
Thank you. Love you too, buddy. Namaste.
Namaste.